You know, I love Halloween time. Now, mostly for the candy, but I also like all the, cultural spooks and frights of the season. But before we go any further though, I got a pro tip on the candy. Don't buy any of that shit before the 31st, alright? It's all gonna go on these crazy massive sales because they got all this candy and they gotta get rid of it to clear the aisles and all that crap. So save your cash, spend it wisely, buy that shit the week after Halloween. You're gonna walk away with like 30 bags of candy and you spent like $5. It's insane. Now, this might surprise you, but despite what I just said about loving Halloween, I'm not and have never really been a horror movie guy. Horror or horror? People always make fun of me because of the way I say it. I always said horror, a horror movie guy. So when it comes to not liking horror movies, it's true, I'm afraid, I guess. Most horror movies, they just don't interest me for one reason or another. I don't usually obsess over things that have become a common staple of that genre. Like jump scares, loud, scary noises. Or things like excessive gore. And then there's the fact that half of the genre are these corny slasher movies that honestly don't put any real fear into me at all. See, the way I look at it is if any of these deranged maniacs came at me with a knife, there's a chance, and granted it might be a small chance, but there's a chance that I could 100% for a fact fuck these guys up beyond repair. I'm talking about kicking him in the nuts, stomping him in the groin, breaking his fucking shin bones.
Suplex him, put him in the camel clutch, break his back, and then fuck his ass, make him humble to even respect authority.
Honestly, I'm surprised that's something you don't see in more slasher movies. The killer just getting absolutely fucking obliterated and the shit kicked out of him. But, I guess if that happened, the movie would just be over halfway through. Imagine a horror movie with a psycho slasher villain and he gets his shit pushed in halfway through the movie and then the other movie is just like a drama about life. That'd be funny. Someone should make that. Alright, now horror movies about ghosts and demons, right? I can't watch them. You wanna know why? Because I'm a fucking coward, despite everything I just told you. You see, I have a primitive Neanderthal brain when it comes to things that actually put fear into me, and it's totally based on a fight or flight response. So if a ghost ever came at me, I'm not gonna be able to punch it in the face. It just doesn't work like that. After all, I'm not some mystical Shaolin monk who trained his entire life to use his chi for that specific purpose. So there's option one right out of the window. And now, most of the time, you can't run from the fucking ghost either, because he just appears around the next corner. He's got you trapped, he's coming at you from all directions. It's like being back in Vietnam. There's also the fact that I got a very active imagination, especially late at night, in the dark, and I still have creepy thoughts of scary ghost faces from movies I've seen a fucking decade ago peeking around the corner to spook me, and they won't leave me the fuck alone, seriously. Fuck those movies. So that's just like most of the horror genre right out the window for me. And that leaves me with the remainder of horror movies, which are, either genre benders like horror comedies, and then you got monster movies. And let's face it, all the good horror comedies, you already know the name of them. And as far as monster movies go, the vast majority of them are cheesy schlock that I suffer through because I get this cynical enjoyment from watching them and suffering along. So with all that in mind, you should know that if I actually take the time to recommend a horror movie to you, it's a very carefully thought out thing that does not come lightly from me. And if I could recommend just one horror movie, just one, that movie would absolutely be Bone Tomahawk. Bone Tomahawk is a genre-bending Wild West horror adventure movie with an ensemble cast written and directed by a lauded Western novelist and made on a small budget of $1.8 million. I have watched it multiple times since I first saw it, only last year, and not only is it now my favorite horror movie, but it's quickly become one of my favorite movies in general. Bone Tomahawk is about the residents of a small western town which on one fateful night has two people abducted by a clan of mythical, cave-dwelling cannibals. Happening during a time where most of the men are away on the cattle trails during the summer season, it falls upon the aging sheriff and his equally old backup deputy, the crippled husband of a woman who got kidnapped, and the town's most notorious bachelor to form a four-man posse and brave dangers known and unknown to get them back. Now I said an ensemble cast, right? Let me see if you recognize any of these names here. Kurt Russell, Patrick Wilson, Matthew Fox, Richard Jenkins, David Arquette, Sid Haig, I mean, come on, the acting chops of all these guys are time-tested and true, and every single one of them nails the characters that they play in this movie. Now, I'm going to talk about these characters and why I love them so much in a bit, because they're really the driving force behind why I love this movie so much. But there's also a big thing this movie has going for it besides the ensemble cast, and that person is the writer and director. You see, Bone Tomahawk is written and directed by this guy who's named S. Craig Zahler. And before making this movie, he was a prolific writer of acclaimed Western novels, and it definitely shows. Everything in this movie just oozes authenticity. If it wasn't for the more supernatural-ish elements of it, it wouldn't be hard to mistake this movie for just a straight Western. Everything from dress, to speech, to mannerisms, personalities, the bigotries and social progress of the times are captured so fluently, and the only thing that's more impressive than like its realness and authenticity is how seamlessly it's all blended with the more mythical horror story occurring within it. I'm gonna do my absolute best not to spoil the surprises in this movie because, oh, it's so good. But I do want to talk about some of these characters because they're just so excellently done. And I think it really hammers the point home about why I love Bone Tomahawk so much, right? Especially when it comes to our main cast of heroes. Now, in a lot of movies that I've watched over the years, I feel like a lot of the time characters are just barely there with their personalities, their motivations don't exist, and, well, they just don't have any character. More than half of the time, they seem just like bodies that are placed on screen to rack up a kill count or something. And what I love a lot about Bone Tomahawk is that every major character feels like a character.
Why are you in my breakfast?
They have distinct personalities and mannerisms. The way they speak with one another about the current situation and past events make their characters actually feel alive, like they're people who are living in this world on screen. And making them feel alive like that is something that's kind of important in a movie when the threat of death is on the line to get you to care about the people in it. So for instance, you got Kurt Russell. He's right at home in this movie. He plays Sheriff Franklin Hunt. And now Russell is a veteran of some great westerns and some great horror movies and just plenty of great movies in general. So seasoned actor, and it's clear that his character is the backbone of the town that relies on him in this movie. He's this experienced guy, well-practiced. He's only somewhat hampered by his age. He's smart, he's knowledgeable, he's a natural leader, but you can also tell that he has vulnerabilities and insecurities, and there's a lot on his mind. He knows it's his duty to protect the people that he's sworn to serve for better and for worse, and he's prepared to pretty much sacrifice everything to pull off this rescue mission that he's on.
There are limits to the responsibilities of a town sheriff. Riding out
Lorna,
into the
I'm
territory.
going. There isn't an option.
Then you get somebody like Patrick Wilson, who most of you know probably from the Conjuring movies, but I'll always remember him as Night Owl in the Watchmen movies, because that's where I first saw him. He plays a character named Arthur O'Dwyer, and he's the husband of Samantha O'Dwyer, who is one of the people who have been kidnapped by the cannibals. And Arthur is recently crippled from a roofing accident in the movie, and he spends the entirety of the movie with a broken leg. And, he loves his wife so much that despite his ill health, he sets out on a journey that's pretty much going to test everything from his physical abilities to his religious faith.
You seeing all this? This is what I prayed my whole life for. For help right now.
And his handicap sets him back greatly, and you genuinely don't know if he's going to make it through the journey in time or just at all. And Patrick Wilson does such a tremendous job at just making you feel genuine concern for this character's physical health, his mental health, just everything about it is just so good. It's probably the best role I've ever seen him in. The actress who plays his wife is also pretty good in this too. Her name's Lily Simmons. She plays his wife Samantha. And again, multifaceted character. Considering the time period, think Wild West, she's probably just a homemaker. But, it's clear in the movie that she's a little bit more than that. She's smart, she's educated, she's resourceful, she's full of resolve. She's some kind of nurse to a doctor. But, it's established pretty early on that doctor is like a total drunkard. And it's really her who's kind of the real doctor in town.
Shot in the leg.
Shot in the leg.
And Doc Taylor's in his cups?
Deep. I took his equipment.
I have my own.
Does yours contain 2 bottles of vodka?
So you got this rather progressive woman character in a time period where women were starting to get more and more, progressive with the beginnings of feminism. On the contrast, you have this other character who's played by Matthew Fox, and he plays this roguish guy. His name's John Bruder. He's like the town's most notorious bachelor.
It's like a church in here. It will relax even pious women.
and he can almost seem to be almost like an outlaw at times. He's clearly a man of his times. He's cynical and he's hedonistic from living a hardened life on the frontier.
Smart men don't get married.
He's bigoted from past experiences. He's morally gray and socially questionable with the actions he takes and the things he says.
And I've killed more Indians than everyone here put together.
Well, it's an ugly boast.
It isn't a boast, but a fact.
And he's an experienced gunslinger, and he's got this devilish charm. And, Matthew Fox nails all of these aspects. It's a sharp contrast to the modernized progressive woman that Lily Simmons plays. And he's sort of the last vestiges of the Old West in all its baggage. And he's a very symbolic character in this movie. And you'll find yourself questioning what his motives truly are in this movie and whether, that strange moral code he's kind of holding himself to will hold true in the end. Now, I found him to be my favorite character because of this, because he kept me thinking throughout the movie.
If you want to question my morals, do it later.
And then lastly, you got Richard Jenkins, who plays backup deputy Chicory, and he's an old widower whose better years are clearly behind him, but he's funny and he's sincere and he's very agreeable. He offers many moments of levity in what is otherwise a very dark in tone movie, and it helps break up the tension when the tension's a little too high, and it's so well done, it's never intrusive or gets in the way, and you can't help but laugh with him when he lightens the mood, and you also can't help but feel for him when he kind of reminisces about the past.
Well, there's some good people in trouble, and I got to do what I can for them. So, I'll see you back here.
Now, Half a Bone Tomahawk, I would honestly say, is more of like an adventure movie than a horror movie. You spend a lot of time getting to know these four men, and you follow them on a very tough journey from green pastures to desolate mountains, fending for themselves against the real dangers of the Old West, like bandits, disease, wild animals, all that kind of stuff. The horror here comes from not knowing whether they'll even make it to their destination in time, or if all of them will even make it. It's a tense journey, it's full of trial and tribulations, and it asks you as the audience to put so much faith in them that it kind of mimics the faith that they're placing in each other. And then the other half of Bone Tomahawk is what I would describe as a traditional monster or cannibal movie. So without spoiling too much of the mystery, the troglodytes, as the villains are known, they're almost supernatural. They emit these eerie trumpet-like screams. They got this ability to appear from seemingly out of nowhere, and they have these truly ghastly-looking appearances that are just unnerving. And yet, it's important to note that they're not Indians. To quote this film's own Native American, who is an educated and learned man known as the Professor, who further blurs the lines, by the way, between the turn-of-the-century progressivism and the centuries past tragic relations between the white man and the native, he describes the creature as so.
Man like you would not distinguish them from Indians, even though they're something else entirely.
There's a very mythical, indigenous tone to these villains. It's a concept I've seldom, if ever, I've really seen explored in a lot of stories. Native American tribes across America have stories and legends about cannibals, right? The most famous today is probably the Wendigo, but something that people don't usually know is that a lot of tribes have stories about other tribes, in quotations, or, groups of inhuman monsters or evil beings that they fought against and feared, and they use these stories to impart things like moral lessons. But the thing is, to many of the indigenous people who these stories are part of their mythos, even though these beings in these stories might seem like humans, or to them, they weren't just other tribes of regular people like themselves. Usually they were another race, or sometimes even spirits or monsters or giants. And this movie takes the time to look at that sort of myth and asks, what if such a thing was true? What if, in addition to the normal indigenous people of the United States, there were these other groups that, appear in these mythologies that were actually inhabiting the hills? Horror movies tend to borrow extensively from the monsters of other cultures across the globe all the time, and it's interesting, intriguing, and quite honestly refreshing to see such an interpolation of indigenous American mythos into horror films outside of the usual Bigfoot or Wendigo shit. And though our heroes, who are 4 white men, might refer to these villains as Indians, perhaps even proving the professor's point in the end, even the most seasoned Indian killer among them, Mr. Bruder, is forced to confront the fact that they're dealing with something out of their known reality. And to me, it's a brilliant twist on the idea of the fear of the unknown. The foe is so familiar to something that's already known that the differences between the two are truly horrifying. So there's even more I could gush about all day long if I really wanted to about this movie. The cinematography, gorgeous. The use of color and costume design to convey the journey from the known to the unknown is absolutely fantastic. The sound, and especially the music, despite its sparsity, brings a sense of like visceral realism that's contrasted nicely with this almost romantic notion of the Old West that's just waiting to be shattered by all the shocking violence and wickedness, especially within the film's climax. It's so rare for a horror movie to trigger my sense of imagination and wonder while still keeping me feeling unnerved and uncomfortable throughout it, and Bone Tomahawk does all of that and more. So get the fuck out of here and go watch it.